It's FoosTalk Live.
You talking to me?
Compelling and lively banter.
Are you going to talk to us?
Talking foosball.
Foosball was how I measured my value as a man. You took that away.
Players and fans, promoters and pros. Unedited and raw.
Talk.
Living in the moment.
We have a lot of important things to talk about.
All while practicing social distancing.
Cool. We'll talk. No big whoop.
Let's get this thing started. FoosTalk Live.
Coming to you live from the studios of Foosball Radio and Inside Foos TV, it's the 31st episode of FoosTalk Live. Brought to you in part by 518 Prints, truly one of the best printers of promotional items, t-shirts, jackets, hoodies, and foosball apparel. Visit 518prints.com. FoosTalk also brought to you in part by Foosballers the Movie. Find out more about this Joe Hesslinger documentary at foosballersthemovie.com. Brought to you in part by Foosball Clubs USA, promoting foosball through school systems all over the country. Visit foosballclubsusa.com. Also brought to you by Foos by Tony and Foos by Brandon. You can take lessons from a top pro today. And also brought to you by USTSO, helping to usher in a new competitive foosball era. Register now at usafoosball.com. Welcome once again. Hey there, I'm Tom Robinson. We're back for another edition of FoosTalk Live, this one being our 31st episode, and we're glad you can make it tonight. So, of course, I can't do this on my own. I certainly have to have some help with a great forward and a great voice. In fact, you might know who he is. He is one of the world. He is actually the world's best play-by-play foosball announcer. It's Jim Stevens. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Tom. If it's Sunday night, it must be FoosTalk Live. You know, each week, and we've talked about this before, I really look forward to these 2 hours every Sunday night. A lot of fun talking foosball with some of the biggest names in the sport, hanging out with you and our good friend who we'll introduce here in a minute. But looking forward to tonight's show. I am from California. I'm from Los Angeles. Started playing foosball there, grew up there. And tonight, it's sort of a California-themed show as we talk, of course, to a legendary promoter from the state of California. And also, Mark and I will detail our top 5 greatest players ever out of the state of California. So looking forward to it.
State of California, of course. Let's see. What are they known for other than foosball? Let me see. Gold? Yeah.
That's it? That's all you got?
No,
Disneyland, the Pacific Ocean, Big Sur, the Redwood
Silicon
trees.
Valley? Yeah. Silicon Valley. Let's see what else.
Hollywood. Hey,
Oh
Hollywood.
man, I almost completely
Capitol
forgot
Records.
about. Yeah. Capitol. Oh, all right, you got me. You know more about your home state than I do. There's no doubt about that. But looking forward to it tonight. Yeah, I think that California's a great place to focus our attention this evening, and naturally, lots of great foosball there. So, Jim, what was this last week like for you? Were you staying home? Are you kind of locking down?
To some degree, yes. I mean, not completely. We've made certainly some alterations to the way we had been doing things a little bit as we move into the fall and the winter. So one day at a time, as usual, just being as safe as we can, while also trying to live our life. So
sure.
But all in all, a good week of focusing on inside food stuff and hanging out with the family and of course homeschooling still.
Of course,
and the kids are completely homeschooling now as the schools have shut down for a couple of months, at least till January. So. But, again, it's the one thing we've really learned during this year, this strange year of 2020, is to take everything one ball at a time, one day at a time, one moment at a time, and just do the best we can, make good plays, make good decisions, and be safe.
If there was evidence for Murphy's Law, which you know what that means, right? If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. I think 2020 is the proof positive that Murphy's Law exists.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. I'm from California, right, Tom? I'm from Southern California.
Okay.
There's also another half of the state known as Northern California. Might as well be two different states because there's a rivalry, Dodgers versus Giants, etc. Silicon Valley versus Hollywood, although they've sort of mixed together on several projects. But there's another guy that is from California, now living in Chicago. He's from Northern California, out of San Jose, and I think it's probably time to bring him in as well. go ahead. Introduce our partner.
Well,
Tom.
I got to say, when he talks about his early days in foosball, growing up in California playing foosball, I always find it interesting in the sense that Mark Torres talks about how he had to dodge bullets occasionally to play foosball, which I got to say, now that's determination. Mark, are you with us?
It's only a mild exaggeration. Dodging punches for sure. And by the way, if I could just add on a couple of companies you might have not heard of before. Apple Computers is from Northern California.
Right.
But there's another little company. I used to pass by this little company and laugh at them. Pass by this little company because it's in Los Gatos, and I lived in Campbell, and I also lived in Willow Glens. I passed by this little company. This little company starts distributing DVDs in the mail. I'm like, you guys are going to go to complete crap.
DVDs.
Technology's going to change. You're going to be dead in the water. Little company, Netflix. Little company I pass by all the time.
Gee.
Little company called Netflix.
I think I've heard of them.
A couple other things you might have heard of from California. Yeah, I'm from Northern California. Jim's from Southern California. And like all tribal systems, Northern California and Southern California hate each other. Hate each other's football teams, hate each other's baseball teams, hate each other's foosball players. We are two disparate communities.
Okay.
And if there was ever a civil war in the United States, it would start off with Northern California fighting Southern California. But we may become a community later.
This explains a lot. I totally get your relationship. Now I see why there's this constant back and forth between you two. All things are revealed to me. It's California. That's what it's all about, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's a big part of it, no doubt about it. When I think of Mark Torres, who is absolutely one of my best friends as well, but I also think of him as a bit of a rival because he is from Northern California. And I'm sorry, I don't generalize usually like that, but I am in this case. So,
yeah,
I thought maybe you were a Dodgers. Huh?
Giants, baby.
I thought you might wear your Giant hat tonight. Yeah, but I do have on an LA Dodgers cap tonight, and so so there we are.
Okay. Well, guys, it is a very at least the Southern California is really desert land, isn't it? I mean, it's relatively speaking desert land.
Mm.
And that
Tom
can generate.
Tom, I want you to pick up an almanac.
Come on, you let me have my segue. Let me have my segue.
You still have encyclopedias, right? This is really lush, fertile country all over California. It was the ag capital of the world forever, but I guess
wait.
It could be a little dry.
I'm not like born yesterday. I've been to Venice Beach. I get it. It's cool. I know what you're trying to do here.
There is a lot of desert there. There's also a mountain peaks. You can surf and you can ski in the same day if you want to.
Right.
It's actually the terrain in Southern California in particular is pretty unusual. But a lot of desert, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
a lot of vineyards too, though. People don't know about all those vineyards.
Well, don't get me started here. I mean, I love California Pinots. The Pinot Noir, absolutely love, and of course the Cabernet's not half bad either. Yeah, some great stuff. And I gotta say, my heart pours out to these guys who work so hard on those vineyards, and most recently had some rough issues with the fires. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Brutal.
Yeah. But
speaking of California, our guest tonight, folks, is a guy you may or may not have heard of, a guy that maybe hasn't been a regular on the Pro Tour for several years, but a guy named Phil Schlaefer, who was one of the earliest California promoters up in Northern California. I remember meeting him up in Fremont in the Bay Area in the very early 1980s when I walked up to him and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Schlaefer," because you always want to be respectful of your elders.
Is that Fred? Is that Fred now?
And still, but Phil ran some great tournaments. We used to come up from Southern California at his events. Later became a ProMaster player. He was tournament director on the Tornado Tour for a little while, and he was also the host of a television show on the Versus Network back in 2009 called the Foosball Master Tour. Tom, and I don't think you've seen any of the footage of this. Maybe you will soon. But it was a show that invited 32 players, including most of the top players in the world: Colin Alfredo, Sprademan, Pappas, Ryan Moore, Robert Atha, all to Las Vegas to compete in this invitational that was recorded and with interviews and everything else and aired on the Versus Network in 2009. So lots to talk about with our special guest tonight, Phil Schlaefer. And I know Mark Torres, he's a San Jose guy as well. I know you know him very well.
He's one of the first pros I met. So there was a tournament at the Keystone Arcade, and that arcade is biking distance for me. It's a arcade I grew up around. This is the same arcade I referenced when there was all the gang fights, and there was a there was a tournament there, and his nickname is Dr. Doom. And when you're a beginning player, you're a beginning player in 1988, 89, I think, and you hear there's a guy named Dr. Doom playing in a foosball tournament.
Man.
You're like your eyes light up. So and he was true to his word, true to the moniker of his name. He's an incredibly skilled player, and he had his so he won novice singles at the Worlds in 1987.
Wow.
Fun fact. And he was wearing that jacket. So now is a world champion named Dr. Doom in your local playing hall. And he won the tournament. So he's like, he's hitting on all cylinders. The Dr. Doom, the pro with the jacket, just won the tournament. So yeah, he was a big inspiration. And I'm sure when we get to him, he's going to tell the story. And I love the story. I was very close to it for decades.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about how he got the Dr. Doom thing. And I think these days, more of the players need to adopt, some kind of moniker. The Terminator, or the Bull, as in Torres.
El Toro.
El Toro.
Tom, you're now officially the Terminator now.
I'm the Terminator. Not on the table.
You're the Tominator. The Tominator.
The Tominator.
Something tells me that's not exactly complimentary, but that's okay, guys. I can take it. By the way, all this talking has really got me thirsty. What Jim and I like to do right about this time is to reveal our favorite IPA. Well, so, okay, Jim, I know we're staying to California. So what's up? What do you have from California tonight?
Tonight I'm having a Lagunitas IPA. It is out of Petaluma, California, just north of San Francisco. And it's actually a beer, one of the IPAs I had first, maybe 25 years ago. Created in 1993. It's different. It's very good. It's a little maltier than most IPAs are. Almost a Belgian style IPA, but very good. 6.2 ABV, 51 on the IBU scale. Here we go.
Sounds good.
Tastes like home.
Tastes
like home.
I thought you were going to say something else. Tastes like home. Excellent. Well, I never want to repeat myself often when it comes to doing the show, but tonight I'm going to repeat an IPA which I just had recently, which I love a lot. In fact, it's from San Diego, Ballast Point, the Ballast Point Brewing Company, Sculpin IPA. It's the Grapefruit Sculpin IPA. So yeah, I'm going to drink another can of this tonight. There it is, and away we go.
No glass for Tom.
No glass for me. It's got to come straight from the can, man, and it's cold.
Hey, you guys. I'm drinking. I call it Lacroix, but I guess it's pronounced Lacroix because it's from like Wisconsin, and it's a carbonated drink with no alcohol in it.
Wow.
And it barely has any flavor. This is lemon, so it's like the can was resting near a bag of lemons at some point.
You're a bag of lemons.
It has the essence of lemon.
The essence.
What it is. So, bottoms up, freaks.
Yeah, here's to a non-California drink, Mark.
I don't play by the rules.
Woo! Cheers.
That sound in the background is me urinating, by the way. It's just me over and over and over urinating.
See, we never mind.
It's a good thing this isn't on video.
Oh, yeah. It's a very good thing. A very good thing. So, okay. Now we also have to mention the fact that we're toasting a California foosball group. Our honor group of the week is Foos by the Bay. Yeah, the Bay Foos. Those folks from San Francisco who play foosball in the Bay Foos Club, the Bay City Foos Club. Is that what it would be called? I'm trying to think. Okay, where did I write that down?
It's actually the Bay of Pigs Foos Club in Cuba.
The Bay Area, I think it might be. Bay Area Foos.
Bay Area Foosball Club. Yes,
it's Bay Area Foos.
San Francisco. There you go. And
not to be confused with the socialist Bay of Pigs Foos Club in Cuba.
Oh, one word. That's all. One
they
word.
Produce some athletes, though.
You know what? I'm gonna have some more IPAs.
Here's to NorCal. Here you go, guys. That's the only time you're ever going to hear that from
Cheers.
me.
Bay Area Foosball Club, the honor group of the week. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Now we did it officially. Well, guys, I got to say that because we are focusing on California, I mean, it's only right that we focus in on a tournament that we're featuring this week on the FoosTalk Live flashback.
With great moments in foosball history, this is a FoosTalk Live flashback.
Billy Pampa's possession on his 3-rod, another opportunity, I believe it's his third, to put the national title away. You don't want to let Lafredo and Moore hang around too long. Billy Pampas puts the ball back into play, walks back and forth, shooting against Terry Moore. Billy Pampas stokes it home to the near side. Billy Pampas wins his second major title of the day. Trevor Park wins his first major title. You gotta feel good about that.
Listen in next time for another great moment in foosball history. It's FoosTalk Live flashback.
And there you have it from 2005. It was Trevor Park's first major, correct?
It was his first major win. That was actually in Chicago, Illinois. It was his first ever major championship after losing in 9 straight Open finals. How about that? Including 3 Open doubles World Championship finals as well. A momentous weekend. Billy Pappas doubled that weekend as well, winning singles and doubles. That was really the heart of Billy Pappas's successful years. That 2005 through about 2009 or so, Mark Torres. Those were really big years. And you've talked about this. He won 4 World Championships in like 6 years in an era that included Brademan, Moore, Collignon, maybe the 4 greatest players of all time, Lafredo. And he had to get through all of those guys to win those World Championships. But the big news that weekend was Trevor Park, who everybody likes, and everybody was really happy to see him finally get his major title.
The breakthrough. That's great.
Yeah, there's
stuff.
some story behind that too, because Trevor was essentially out of the game. And if you talk to Trevor, he kind of describes it as a blank time for foosball. I don't think in his mind, I think it had passed him by winning a major. And Billy will tell you that it was his goal to help Trevor get over the hump. I don't think Trevor, frankly, I don't think Trevor knows how many majors he had lost. If you asked him, he would probably say somewhere between 6 and 9, 6 and 10. He wouldn't know. So pretty much maybe it's a coping mechanism or maybe it's just being aloof. But that was the big one. And then he got another one after that, I believe, another doubles event after that. So it was a big deal for him to do that.
Yeah, that was my next question was what exactly, after Trevor had broken through like that, how long was it before he made it to another major tournament and major victory?
Billy,
I think it was the very next year. I think 2006 Hall of Fame Classic, or as it might have been called, the International Championships that year, because Phil Schlaefer was running it. I believe that's the year that Billy Pappas and Trevor Park defeated. I want to say, was it Collignon and Lafredo in the final?
I think it was.
Okay.
To win the doubles championship. We'll look that one up, but I believe it was. So no, that was big news, and you got to be happy. And Trevor Park we might hear that name a little later on tonight as well.
Yeah, maybe. You never know. So guys, I know that because it is about California and we're really focusing on what's been happening in that state. Of course, tonight's top 5 reflects that. So what do you say we dive into the top 5 California players?
Time once again for the FoosTalk Live top 5.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here's Jim Stevens and Mark Torres.
He's from NorCal. I'm from SoCal. We're going to talk some California foosball tonight, Mark. And again, it's up to the discretion of the top 5 person to really decide what makes a top 5 eligible person in this case, a player in this case. And a lot of times it's longevity. Some of these guys lived in California for a short time before moving on. A lot of great players have lived in California. Todd Lafredo has lived in California. Don Swan and other Hall of Famers who passed through and maybe spent a little time there. But for me, it's basically players who started their careers at the very least in California and had maybe the bulk of their success in California as well, or at least someone that you always looked at and identified as a California player, no matter where they might have lived.
Yeah, I had a very hard time with this one. I will admit to some error bias because it's my home state. And so guys I liked more might have made it on the list than guys I'm not as fond of. But hey, that's what I get to do because it's my list.
Because it's your list.
Yeah.
I like that. Take possession of your errors. That's always a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
let's
get it started.
FoosTalk Live top 5. number.
Let me start with my number 5, but I'll tell you, I got to start with one. I never do this, but I got to give an honorable mention because I took this guy off my list. My number 6 is going to be Dave Gummison, because Dave Gummison, he really won the bulk of his championships while living in Minnesota. But he's I don't know where he's originally from, but I met him when he was living in San Diego. Mm-hmm. So I moved Dave Gummison into my number 6 because the bulk of his championships came out of state. So whatever, he'd absolutely have to be my top 5 if I considered him from California. So I made an excuse to exclude him. My number 5 is actually my favorite player of all time. I love this guy. He's an unsung hero of California foosball. And I suppose of the majors you could give him, he won trucks at the Striker Championship. But this guy is like just the best. I mean, the thing I love about Thor Donovan is you never knew if he was practicing or playing a match. If he was practicing with somebody, you thought he could be playing a match, so you didn't interrupt him. But he was just the kindest, sweetest, hardworking guy. There's a story about Thor Donovan. The story is that Jim Wiswell told him to win a championship with his pull kick. And that's why because Thor has a rocket pull shot. The guy if anything, I mean, Thor's a lefty. And, his 5-bar can be up and down. The decision-making be up and down, but super duper talented. Awesome, awesome guy. Thor Donovan, just a maestro, won the tables and striker. My favorite player all time. My number 5, Thor Donovan.
I've heard that about Thor a lot of times, that he's their favorite player, and he was a lot of fun to watch. And he would get down low with that pull kick and just really dig in each and every ball, even when he was practicing, as you said, Mark. But there was so much intensity. Literally one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. But on the table, just a demon on the table with that pull kick, and legendary. And of course, he would run into walls. Maybe never won a championship, but was always competitive, and certainly a guy to look at. Dave Gummison, by the way, I want to say he lived in California for about 3 years. He's from Minnesota.
Okay.
Grew up in the Minnesota foosball program, the very strong program they had up there in the late 70s into the early 80s. But Gummison, also, that's where I first met him. And I've told this story before. I didn't really like him. He'd come up from San Diego and he'd kill us and he'd be arrogant about it. I said, this guy's a jerk. Later, when I started working the tour, Dave started doing matches with me. We became great friends. And I've told him that story many times, and he still hasn't forgiven me. My number 5 is a guy out of San Diego that worked with me. And again, maybe there's a little bias here, but really when you check the record, maybe this number 5 position is merited for Evan Stachlik. Evan, maybe, I think he won one title. I think he won a super singles title on Dynamo in 1986, I believe is what it was. Other than that, he was a steady force on the pro tour for about 20 years with a ton of top 5, top 3 finishes. Great partner, could play forward, could play goalie. And really, I think it was his consistency, didn't win a lot, but was always right there. And at one point was even the number 1 rated player in the world because he was so consistent, and he played everything: state championships, regional championships, majors, etc., and was always consistently in that top 3 to 5, including the 1 win, and just a super talent on the table. So for me, it's arguable because there's so many other guys, including, obviously I had Thor as an honorable mention. I did not have Dave Gummison on my list. I didn't think he spent enough time in California.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
But for me, number 5, I'm putting my old friend, the Moondoggy, Evan Stachlik.
Here's a fun fact about Evan Stachlik. He was a novice singles world champion, and his brother Eden won the next year, and then Phil Schlaefer won novice singles world championship the year after that. So Phil won in 87, Eden won in 86, and Evan won in 1985, the novice singles world championship.
Yeah, Evan and I also turned pro the same weekend in 1982 at the U.S. Open, when he took 3rd in open singles and I took 3rd in open doubles. And so we sort of have that in common as well, as long as also with working some of the biggest matches in the history of the sport with Inside Foods. Okay.
FoosTalk Live Top 5. Number 4.
It's hard to extract the history of foosball in California and leave Jeep, Greg Perry, off the list. I mean, he's in the long shot. He's an actor. He's a agent. He fancies himself in Hollywood. But when I met Jeep in '89, he was meditating underneath foosball tables, and he had won open singles at the Worlds the year before, I believe. I think he won in '88. Is that right, Jim?
That is
Jeep
right.
won? Yeah. So he wins open singles at the Worlds. He's probably the last guy and probably he's the last guy, and probably will be the last guy to win an open singles world championship shooting a push kick. He's kind of crazy, but judo black belt, 5-bar, like would go to 10 or 11 or 12 seconds on the 5-bar every single time. Very, very disciplined, but just a hardworking guy. The whole meditation thing was part of the mental approach to the game that probably got, you see guys that win that aren't the most talented guys, and they compensate in certain places. And Jeep compensated with sheer will and discipline and presence in the clutch and being a master of the game. Jeep's a true master of the game. So you can't think about California Masters and the history of California and the very few world championships in open that Californians have and leave Jeep out of the conversation. So I got Jeep at number 4.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk Jeep now, but I certainly will. He is one of only 3 Hall of Fame players, male players out of the state of California, yet he makes Mark's number 4. My number 4 is Trevor Park, the guy we talked about a little bit earlier. 9 finals. I mean, say what you will. Yeah, I know he didn't win any of those first 9 finals, but he reached the finals. I mean, what an accomplishment. And most of the time he lost to better players or better teams. And then to finally break through in 05. But he also won obviously the 06 Hall of Fame Classic, the 05 Nationals. And just his impact on Southern California foosball in particular was immense, not only as a local league director, but also, of course, working for Warrior Table Soccer, the president of Warrior Table Soccer, CEO at this point, I think. And so a guy that has had a huge influence on Southern California foosball and California foosball in general. But to make it to at least 11 finals, that's telling you something. That is an impressive statistic that not even Greg Perry or some of the other guys on this list could vouch for. He is not a guy that needs to be overlooked at this point. Number 4 for me, the great Trevor Park.
FoosTalk Live Top 5. Number 3.
Well, in defense of me putting Trevor Park above Jeep, because I have Trevor at number 3. If you look at Trevor Park's body of work, and mind you, I've seen his jacket closet within the last, 6 weeks. We were on the phone FaceTiming. He showed me his jacket closet. His jacket closet is wall to wall with jackets. If you look at the body of work, when we had 5 tour events, and at this point you could play amateur, novice, basically rookie, amateur, novice, and pro. Trevor won everything you could imagine winning, everything, up until he lost those 9 championships in open in a row. He won amateur singles, amateur doubles, novice singles, novice doubles, all world titles, all tour events, just absolutely dominated those lower rankings, and then got to the pros. And everyone will tell you he was expected to do that in open. And although he didn't, he was getting to all those finals. And I'll tell you what, the difference is Trevor might not even be on my list if he didn't win the one in 05. The fact that he won the one in 05 and then he won the next one, like, that gives me permission to put him on this list. Once I put him on that list, and then you talk about his commitment as a tournament director, you talk about his commitment supporting the leagues, and now he's helping carrying the ball with Warrior and really expanding the foosball market. The entire body of work as an ambassador to the sport from California, just the winning, the championship winning, and finally getting over the hump. I got to edge Trevor Park just above Jeep at number 3.
All right, I can see that certainly, but I've got Jeep over Trevor Park, and I've got Greg Jeep Perry at number 3. And let me give you a couple of really impressive statistics from the career of Greg Perry. In 1985, he teamed up with Tina Roton, another Hall of Famer, a lady, to win open doubles at the national championships. The only time a lady has ever won a major open championship on the American tour, and she did it with Greg Perry. You mentioned the 1988 World Championship in open singles, and yes, Greg Perry is the last guy to win an open singles championship not shooting a pull shot or a snake shot. The last kick shooter to win it. He also went on and did switch to a snake shot later in his career, but he also won the 1996 open singles championship, the Nationals, beating Terry Moore in the final, shooting mostly a push kick there as well, as late as 1996. But it wasn't his shot that really made Greg special. Jeep's 5-row, I might have had him on my top 5 when we did it earlier this year. I don't recall, but if he wasn't in there, he certainly could have been. This was one of the great 5 rows in history. That far wall series, when he switched to that, was nearly unstoppable. He'd get that ball moving so slowly. Some would say stopped. In fact, there was a rule change because he would wait till that ball just as it stopped and then pass it. They changed that rule after that, basically for him. But his 5 row was amazing. His 3 row was okay. It was a little slap kick oftentimes. His dinks were outstanding. The long was not near what some other push kickers can do, but it was solid. And for me, again, a Hall of Famer. A guy who always was an ambassador. I remember, and most people probably remember the first time they ever met Greg Perry, because he came up to you, no matter who you were. If he'd never seen you before, he immediately came up to you, introduced himself and shook your hand, looked you in the eye and said, "Hi, I'm Greg Perry." Now, some of that could have been sales and marketing. He eventually became an agent in Hollywood and a wannabe actor. But for me, number 3, how can you not have Greg Perry in the top 3? Great career. And a long career, starting way back in the 70s, going right up through the 2000s. Greg Perry, for me, is at number 3.
FoosTalk Live Top 5. Number 2.
So I got to go with my guy, Adrian Zamora, at number 2. And Adrian, just the reflexes and the 5 bar and the snappy pull shot with the recoil, and his work as an ambassador himself in the judging as an officiant, and everybody wants him to judge their matches. It's a small thing, though, compared to being from California and watching him beat all these guys. Like he crushed the California guys. He's just dominated the California guys. You talk about Jeep, and I would say between Jeep and even Fernando, all the big matches, Adrian would get past the California guys. And you got to give credit where credit's due. When you could, when you have the hardest people to beat are the people from your own area, because they know everything. The people from your own area are the most comfortable playing you. They know your tendencies. And so to beat these guys, and I've seen Adrian beat these guys in tour events, in clutch matches, and consistently. People didn't want anything to do with Adrian Zamora in the California stuff. I want to get the hell away from him, because he was going to eat you up with the 5 bar, and when the adrenaline was going, the pull shot was going to be snapping off, and you were going to lose. So I got to go with number 2, the Hall of Famer, Adrian Zamora.
Yeah, I've got him at number 2 as well. This is certainly one of the great players of all time. If it wasn't for our number 1, he would be the greatest player ever out of the state of California. As you mentioned, a great official. A couple of interesting little tie-ins here with Adrian. The last tournament I worked was this past February, the very last weekend of February, up in Portland, Oregon, where he and James Castillo, by the way, happy birthday, James, tomorrow. But he and James Castillo won the Moneyball title over Robert Mares and Dan Barber. And so Adrian won there. I also had the chance to play with Adrian at 2 recent Hall of Fame Classics in the Hall of Famer only DYP, where it's Hall of Fame players only in this DYP in Las Vegas. And I drew him twice, and we won both times. And I got to play with him. Yeah, and one of those times at 4-4, we're playing Biney and Lafredo. Lafredo's playing goalie, and I'm digressing, but for a good reason. And so it's the finals. It gets down to the last point, and Adrian calls timeout and says, "Jim, you want this one?" I hadn't played forward the entire time, but I get up there and I against Lafredo, fake the dink one time, and then whip along on Lafredo. And for me, hitting a long push kick on Lafredo to win it was exciting. But Adrian is a guy, class act all the way through, a member of Team USA. In fact, he scored the winning point for the first World Cup that the United States ever won back in 2009 in France. And no one was happier. The entire team just surrounded him and mobbed him after he hit a pull shot from goal on a Bonzini table to win it. 2003 world champion in open doubles with Eddie Gartman, which was unexpected. Colignone and Lafredo had won the previous 4 years, and suddenly it's Gartman and Zamora winning doubles. And not super surprising because of the quality of Adrian's game and Eddie as well. But the fact that it wasn't Colignone and Lafredo was surprising. He also was the open singles champion at the 1996 Nationals, and had won numerous mixed doubles titles out on the Pro Tour on both Dynamo and on Tornado. A guy that I hated to play when I used to go up to Northern California. I had a chance to draw him one time at an event up there in Fremont, and we won. And he was all class as usual, but a guy who has really put together an incredible resume in foosball, and does it the right way, both on and off the table. You mentioned his cat-like reflexes, the way his brush pass, his up looks like his down looks like his up. the smooth pull shot with the recoil. But you never get mad at you can't get mad at Adrian. Some guys, when they recoil on you go, hey, what are you doing? Not with Adrian. Yeah, you just respected the execution of the shot. And so Adrian Zamora, absolutely number 2 on my list, number 2 on Mark's list as well. But number 1 in the hearts of foosball players. This is a great guy and a great player. AZ at number 2.
FoosTalk Live proudly presents the top 5. Number 1.
So, my favorite player is the 1990 Amateur Doubles World Champion, Mark Torres. No, I can't do that. I can't do it. We got the same number 1, Jim. So I'm going to let you take it away in a second here. But I'll tell you what, when I met this gentleman, so he's a left-handed player. When I met him, he was shooting a pull shot. And it's funny, I met him in Santa Clara, and he at a tournament, like a 15-grander, and he beat me in rookie doubles with that horrible pull shot. I returned the favor in like San Bernardino, but that pull shot, I mean, his pull shot, he's a lefty, and he struggled with his pull shot. And then in the blink of an eye, he had adopted the rollover, and it changed the whole entire trajectory of his career. And then he did everything that everybody else who was bold enough to do, everybody who was bold enough that wanted to do it, he went and did it. He got in his vehicle and he started traversing the country with his buddies playing foosball. And his game just took off and hit another level. And he did the other thing that we all wish we could have done. He started partnering with people from around the country. And that, when you travel in the country and partnering with people from around the country, the learning curve spikes. And he's one of the greatest players of all time. I mean, you just expected him and his partner Bobby Diaz to win every single tournament. It was a mystery and the game was methodical, and it was tempoed, and it was nothing exciting to watch, but it was just so darn in your face, in your grill, consistent. He's smart as heck. Brilliant player. Jim, why don't you take it away and talk about our number 1 here?
Yeah, of course, he's number 1. This is one of the 10 greatest players to ever play the game, no question about it. I drew him in a local tournament. I want to say 1989 in Southern California at a place called Yankee Doodles. I drew him. He was the big kid from San Diego, and I said, well, I drew him, and I said, oh well, do the best you can back there, big guy. And we ended up taking like 17th or something. But he, and it was, then 2 years later, he's the best player in the world. It was shocking how quickly it all happened. And you talked about it, Mark, as documented in the movie Foosballers, how he and Robert Maris and Evan Stachlik and then Bill Partridge hit the road in the van, went to all these events. 1991 was sort of his breakthrough year when after switching to the snake shot. He wasn't the first guy to shoot the snake shot in America or even in California. We're going to give that to Bill Partridge, who was the first guy to really have success with it. And then Bill sort of handed it off to a fellow San Diego resident, Terry Moore. And then in 1992, suddenly he's winning open doubles at the tour kickoff, which nobody saw coming. And then second in open singles at the Masters and open doubles at the Nationals. And then in 1992, he wins the World Singles Championship on Tornado. I've never seen a player, and Tommy Yorr would be the only other player I could compare in terms of how fast it happened. It went from 0 to 60 in a year and a half, 2 years, and Terry Moore was quite simply the best player in the world. He ended up being really, I think, the best player of the decade of the 90s. I think he and Bobby Diaz won 14 championships together. Terry won 2 World Singles Championships as well. He and Bobby Diaz only won 1 doubles world championship. That was the big surprise with Terry Moore. This was a team probably favored in almost every one of those world championship events leading into it during the 1990s. They only won the 1, but Terry's resume overall, winning more than 20 titles on the Pro Tour during that decade and really establishing himself unquestionably as the greatest early snake shooter, the guy who really was the first player to ever win shooting the snake shot, and then really continued that on. And again, it was not the walking snake. It was a rocking snake, far side, near side, straight, but his timing was amazing. His 5-row was amazing. His singles game was amazing. His transition game in singles. And this is a man that is about 6'6" and goes about, 3 bills plus. And he's a big, strong man, but he could move very quickly, rod to rod. So for me, I think for you as well, Mark, it was a no-brainer, the best player ever out of the state of California. it's going to be difficult for anyone to better what the great Terry Moore did during the 90s and in through his retirement in the late 2000s. Terry Moore is number one for me as well.
What a list. What a list. In California, of course, had it the majority, I would say, a good portion of some of the top players back in the day, and still more to come, for sure. Does it make you feel proud?
California was always known as a hotbed for novice players, or expert players, as we call them now.
Yeah.
It was always a hotbed for expert players. There's always a ton of great ones. California, unfortunately, had only a couple guys that, as we call it, got over the hump.
Mm-hmm.
There's only a handful of guys that got it. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's just a narrowness about, I think it's part of the culture played into it, and a narrowness. A lot of guys from California didn't expand and play with other people outside of their circle. And a lot of guys didn't travel. And that's a big deal to develop in your game. But potential-wise, there are some hotbeds for talent, and California's always been one of them.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
One of the things that I'd like to talk about in the near future on FoosTalk Live is how does traveling and touring affect someone's trajectory when it comes to their playing ability, and when they really start to move up the ladder? If they can't afford to do so, we never hear about them.
Yeah,
that's true. But you can never hit the high end anyway. You can never become an elite player without touring. So while these guys all had potential, you got to get out on tour. You got to do that in order to reach that highest level, almost without exception. I'm sure you agree, Mark.
Yeah, 100% agree. There's an absolute correlation. And but what's helped advance that? This is not some cheap, contrived plug. The archive, having the Inside Foos videos available to learn and watch, that helped expedite and accelerate some of the skill set. And indeed, some guys gals have gotten a lot further than they could have without traveling by watching and learning from the Inside Foos archive. It's been a big deal.
Makes a big difference.
Yeah, no question about it. And how could you not? I mean, getting to watch is the next best thing for sure. I've got a bunch of honorable mentions as well. I think you do too, Mark. We have to pay homage to a lot of great California players. But hey, maybe we should bring on one of those guys now.
Yeah, I think that's a good opportunity at this moment to introduce our special guest of the week, of course, from California, a great California player, promoter, and co-host of the Foosball Master Tour. His name is Phil Schlaefer. Welcome, Phil.
Gentlemen, how are you?
We are well. How about yourself?
Not bad. I have been going over the top 5 list.
Aha.
And I did scratch off a name and switch one back out.
These guys changed your mind? Is that true?
Oh, it happens all the time to us as well. Yeah.
It's been said Mark Torres can change my mind. So
the tragedy.
It's very true, very true.
Let's hear it, Dad.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start with number 5. Mark and I are in agreement, Thor Donovan.
Nice. I love that guy.
And one of the main reasons I'm picking Thor, not only his amazing skill and the talent, and he did win a little bit, but when he moved into the Bay Area, was in the very early 80s, I believe. And there was a gap from our great 70s players that we had until Thor moved in. So our top guys at the time were Chris Doobie, Adrian, Scott Stewart, Steve Corioso, those type of guys, right? And a lot of us were on that level, pretty good players, but we were like low pros and hadn't really done much nationally. When Thor got into town, he rolled over everybody for a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he must have won 20, 30 Friday night draws in a row, no matter who we got.
Wow. And
he single-handedly kind of brought that next level to all these other great Bay Area players, and that made them, take that next leap. And most notably Adrian, and a lot of good players came out of there. Dana Marr played goalie for Thor, and that brought Dana's game way up. Anthony Nagy, who I met from Pismo Beach, he teamed up with Thor for a while. So Thor was really not just a great player, and a great guy, but really brought that level up in NorCal foosball in about a year and a half there. Everybody took a big, huge jump. So I credit him a lot with that, not just being a great player. And
Awesome.
he didn't do it on purpose. He just, he moved in, and, Thor's a very quiet guy. And, but he led by example. Everybody saw how hard he practiced, how hard he played in a match. And it's like, hey, we can do that too.
Yeah.
And he made so that made the big impact in that area at that time. So he's my number 5. My number 4 is Trevor Park. And you guys made a great case for Trevor and all his accomplishments. Number 3 is Jeep. And, Jim Stevens and I have known Jeep since the 70s. And, his total career is pretty amazing to look at. And he had been very consistent top player for 30 years almost. So he's my number 3. Adrian's number 2. And, of course, Terry's number 1. So.
Yeah.
Now,
Right
the honorable mention list is a great list, too. And you guys haven't put your names out for that, but I'll throw
I want to hear
mine
yours.
out there.
Let's hear yours, man.
Okay, so my honorable mention would be Ben Rivera, one of the greatest SoCal players ever. And I understand Jim taught him how to play.
Really?
Is that right,
79
Jim?
Super Doubles. Yeah, I did. 79 Super Doubles champion, beating his mentor, his late mentor, Ken Allwell, in the finals.
Yeah,
and, and a huge win.
Yeah, and Ben was another player like that. He got really good in a short amount of time. Just all of a sudden, boom, he went way up there. The next honorable mention on my list would be Fernando Derosa.
Yeah.
Fernando has had the huge amount of talent and skill, and he makes everything look so easy. He had a great pull shot, a great rollover, really nice 5. Great underrated defensive player.
Yeah.
So Fernando's right up there on the list. Johnny Lott did most of his winning in his Texas days. But Johnny's an honorable mention because obviously he had won some great titles back in the day. And he had done a lot of work for foosball in a lot of different ways. So he's in an honorable mention, but he's probably down like 8th, 9th, or 10th.
Yeah.
There's one player from the Bay Area that Jim may or may not have seen. He's kind of a myth. But there was a guy named Bobby Thompson who was 19 years old, and he burst out on the tour, and he had taken second to Furry in a couple of open singles matches. And Lafredo approached Bobby to play in an open doubles event way back in, I don't know, this was maybe right after Todd won or just before. And Bobby told him he wasn't good enough yet. Ask him again in a year or so. So that's Bobby Thompson. He was not an arrogant, cocky guy. He just meant it literally. He says, I just don't think you're good enough yet. But we lost him young. He died in a car crash, 19 years old. But he was our top player up to that point. But so he's an honorable mention, at least in my top 10. But my 5 is rounded out.
Yeah, and there's one other guy. I think we got to go back into the 1970s, and maybe it's a guy that you're somewhat familiar with, but a guy named Scott Jackson out of Northern California, who had several top 5 finishes on the tournament soccer tour from 75 through 78. Really an early tournament soccer guy out of Northern California. You mentioned Chris Doobie earlier. The man won a U.S. Open title, won a U.S. Open, won a major, one of the great upsets. Can't forget about him. Scott Stewart, you mentioned him earlier, of course. Outstanding player out of Northern California. Ron Cipiora won a Masters singles championship. Outstanding player, was always in the mix in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Ron was from LA. I forgot about him. Yeah.
Bill Partridge, another guy who made it had 2 top 3 finishes in open events in the early 1990s. He was the first California player and one of the first out on tour to shoot a snake shot and have success. One of the very first players out on tour to have success. One guy you might remember from Southern California, a guy, do you remember Stork? Great. Trace
Eric. The Mad Stork. Trace Eric. Yeah.
Great player. Had a couple of top 5s.
A lot.
Miles, yeah.
They took 5th at the World Championships on Tornado in 93 or 94.
Stork was the very
best. Good. And he and Jeep would battle, and maybe he got the best of Jeep locally, believe it or not. He might have been our best local player.
He had a monster dead bar pull shot. It was dead bar every single time. Yeah.
And a great 5-row as well. And a super nice guy. He sort of moved away from the game, but can't forget about him. And then let's not forget about the ladies. Hall of Famer, the only lady that's a Hall of Famer out of the state of California, Christina Fuchs. Kelly Wyant, also very successful player out of Southern California, and so I can't forget about them. But quite a history of foosball in the state, and of course that's where I started playing, and I have such fond memories of my early days in Southern California playing at J&J Billiards and Happy Jacks, one of the greatest locations in the history of foosball. It was a place that was about 4,000 square feet at 40 tournament soccer foosball brown tops. All the walls inside the place were painted brown with a tournament soccer rainbow on them. And it was an amazing foosball location. I remember it well for the 2 or 3 years it was in existence. So Phil, you're a history guy. You know California history, both Southern California and Northern California. You're also a guy that was one of the first promoters in California, one of the first regular promoters. And I mentioned it earlier that I met you in the early 80s up in Fremont at a tournament up there. And you really had a nice scene going up there. Talk about your early days in promoting foosball in California.
Okay, well, I started foosball 75. Somebody donated an old beat-up Deutschmeister table with a cracked glass tabletop to our park rec center. We started playing on that. Then I started going around at various things. And the promotion started a few years later. I did it really not for an altruistic reason. I just wanted some tournaments in my neighborhood that I didn't have to drive to. I didn't want to drive to Fremont and East Side and all of that. I thought, let's get something going in our neighborhood. So that's kind of how the promotion started. And I bought a couple of tables and put them in this one arcade. I'd talked the owner into letting me run the tournaments there. And that was 1981. But I had gone to some tournaments prior to that, but not a whole lot yet. So that's how that started. And then my first little association was Bay Area Foosball Association, BAFA. And so as I started kind of building up these tournaments, Galaxy was doing their thing on Friday nights, and I would do my thing in Campbell in San Jose on Wednesday nights. And then Keystone Arcade, a couple years after that, got a new owner. And I went over and talked to the guy, and I started to run some foosball events there for him. And that's where I met this third generation of players, Ray Cota, Manuel Cota. And then a couple years later, James Barrero was from that group, Chris Lawson. And then a couple years after that came the next batch of guys, and that's Mark Torres, Serge Aragonis. Serge was 9 years old. James Castillo was 8-9 years old. Fernando, Kinlo, Luan Tai, Itwali, Joel, all those guys came in that next group. And Ray Cota ended up taking a cue from me and got a table or two at his park rec center. He worked for the city of San Jose and started running the tournaments for the kids. And he got Serge and James and those guys. So in the mid 80s, I'd heard about this little arcade in Pismo Beach, and they had one or two foosball tables. And the owner, a woman, Jean Kikuchi, called me and said, "Hey, we'd like to run a big tournament. Can you help us?" So we arranged a deal where I got a U-Haul truck and brought like 10 tables down there. And then we ran a big tournament. And that's where we end up getting some new players, Anthony Nagy and Melvin Osby and some of those guys.
Yeah, Chad Whips would be another. Yeah,
Chad Whips.
Well, Chad Whips came from Mountain View. So that was another one. I would go around the Bay Area. This is now mid-late 80s. And, I was trying to build up a foosball route. Okay, so I'm putting tables out in locations. And it was a big deal to try to talk an arcade owner and then letting some guy put a game in his place, right? Because most arcades own their own stuff. But I got a couple of tables in this place in Mountain View, and we had a draw, and we had an odd number of people. And there's this little kid, probably 10 years old, Chad Whips. And I grabbed him and I said, "Hey, you be my partner tonight. Let's play foosball." So I got him going.
Creepy, by the way.
It was creepy.
A little bit.
But yeah. So that's kind of how, but the promotion thing is a double-edged sword. I listened to your show earlier. If you look at the history of foosball promoters, it's very difficult to be a top player and a promoter. And I want to point out, like, Trevor Park was tearing things up for years. And then when he started being a promoter, it split his time, and you'll see some of the lack of focus and just not, it's always been tough to do both. And, but I'm proud of it, obviously, but I did give up some touring years and all of that. But, it was rewarding to see that a lot of our great Northern Cal players came out of, offshoots of my programs or, directly from my program. So that part I'm really, really happy with. But the thing with promoting also is, and you guys both know this after living here all these years, California, we've had these hot spells and cold spells. It's never been consistent like maybe other parts of the country. Foosball gets really hot for 2 or 3 years, and then for a couple of years, it almost dies and completely goes away. It's weird, and it's always done that for 30, 40 years. It's had this big, huge, up and down popularity swing, and I think partly is, the state has so many other things to compete with, to do for leisure time and for fun, but that. So I know I continue to do a lot of promotion stuff. Kind of felt obligated because I was always worried, if I stopped, it might go away. So that was another, driving force to keep me promoting for maybe some extra years that, deep down I probably didn't want to do, but I felt if I didn't do it, it would go away.
We greatly appreciate that effort, Phil, by the way. This is Tom Robinson, and welcome to FoosTalk Live. I just wanted to interject here. We have a tradition when it comes to our guests. I want to take you all the way back to the very begining. In fact, I'd like to know, when was the first time you saw a foosball table? And in the other side of the question, who was responsible for teaching you how to play?
Okay, the very first memory of a foosball table, and Jim, you might have saw this table at the same place. I was probably 10 years old, and my family went down to LA, and we took a tour of the Queen Mary. And in the lounge area, before you got on the ship, there was a foosball table sitting there. And my little brother and I went over and spun the rods and did whatever we did. And I didn't give it any thought. And then it wasn't till 3 years later, I was hanging around this park rec center, and somebody donated that old table. And we started playing. And I remember I was in 7th grade, and there was some 6th graders in there, and they were playing, and they were kicking our ass all over the place. And I said, I made a vow that day I would never lose to a 6th grader as long as I live again, right? So that I started practicing to get better. And then, years later, Tony Friedman comes out, and he's in 6th grade, and he probably was in 6th grade when I lost to him in singles. But anyway, so I didn't keep my vow, or maybe it was Billy. It was one of those two guys. But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of how my first exposure to foosball was. And then there was an arcade, of course, in the area, and they had a bunch of green top tournament soccer tables. So that was 75, 76.
Okay.
And then they switched very shortly to the blue tops. And then in 78 went to the brown tops, went to 50 cents for 9 balls, which was, crazy.
50 cents.
We used to get
You better not lose.
Yeah.
We used to play, it used to be 11 balls for a quarter, first 1 to 6. So that was a little bit of a change. But and in those days, there were multiple tables in these locations. And I'm sure it was the same. There was a pecking order, right? You couldn't just challenge the best teams on the best table. You had to go back start on the 5th table. And if you won that, you've got your quarter on table 4, and you've got to win that table and then get to table 3 and so forth. So maybe by 11 o'clock, midnight, you might make it to the top table. You get your ass kicked and then you're done, right? So that was kind of how it was. And, so then I went to a tournament. I talked my dad into taking me to the San Franciscan Hotel Goalie War Championships. And I don't know if you were at that one.
I was not at that one. No,
it was like a $15,000 or something, but a lot of money back then.
15 grand for goalies.
It was the Goalie War. It was
Lost
the
your
Goalie
damn
War
minds.
Championships. They did one or
Gil
two.
Jackson won it.
Yeah, they had a couple other events, of course. They had open doubles and everything, but it was called the Goalie War Championship. So my dad drives me up there, and I'm playing with a guy. His name was Daryl, but of course on the foosball table, his name was Double Barrel Daryl, right? And we get to the tournament, and tournament soccer was big on the team names, right? Individual team and player names. So the first name I picked, I was Thor, right? Because I had the blonde hair and everything. So I signed up, and I'm walking through the tournament room, and there's this real guy named Thor, and he's got this airbrushed foosball shirt he's wearing, and it's Thor Donovan.
Oh.
And I'm like, holy crap. And then I watched him play, and I'm like, man, that guy's really good. So I scratched my name out and put Dr. Doom instead.
Dr. Doom.
Yeah, it's great.
So that's how that started. I wanted to be Thor, and the real Thor put me down. So we went, and we were signing up for the tournament. I remember this very clearly. And I'm looking at the old tournament soccer sign-up sheet, right? And it's just this long rectangle thing. And there's 3 boxes, and one box says rookie. The second box said novice, and then it was open. So Double Barrel Daryl and I are looking at this thing. We're trying to figure it out. And I'm like, you know what? We're not rookies. We're the best kids. We're the best kids at the arcade. We haven't lost in 2 weeks. So, and this novice thing sounds kind of wimpy. So let's do this. Let's do the open. So we check the open box. We sign up. We're in open doubles, right? First team we play is the Bay Area's top team at the time, which was Jimmy Lopez and Mike Forsman. And we didn't know anything about the rules or timeouts or any of this stuff, right? So Jimmy Lopez, if you guys know Jimmy, he was like the Tommy Atkinson before Tommy, right? He was loud. He was in your face. He's pointing. He's yelling at you. And I have no idea why he's so pissed off at me. But we're down like 4-0 the first game, and Jimmy calls a timeout. And he hasn't shot one long push kick. He's dinked Double Barrel Daryl 4 times in a row. And I'm looking at Daryl. I'm like, dude, quit jumping out of the way of that thing, right? So I go back there, and then Jimmy does a long, and we lose 5-0. So long story short, we get shellacked in 3 games, and we go in the loser bracket. And we played, I can't remember him now, but we got smoked in that. So my dad, being the patient guy he was, says, we're going home now. So I didn't get a chance to walk around and really look at things. So I was out in 2 in like 35 minutes.
Wow.
And that was my first experience with a big tournament, right? So flash forward a couple of years later, and this is 1980. And myself and the same guy are hanging out in the arcade, and we're playing. And in comes this guy, a midget, right? Dwarf, whatever you want to call him.
Little person.
Little guy.
Whatever you want to call them.
Well, Doobie doesn't mind being called a midget. So I'm going to call him a midget. So, so this midget walks in, and he puts a quarter up, and he challenges us to a game.
There's no punchline here. A midget walks in and puts a quarter up.
He does. And he's got a girl with him, a blonde girl, right? And so, Daryl and I don't know these people. And so we're playing foosball, and he's standing, on the ground. He's not standing up on a stool or anything. And we're playing, and we're beating him up pretty good. And every time we win, he'd say something like, you guys got so lucky, blah, 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 blah. But we're feeling pretty good because we're winning every time. So the next thing you know, he said, well, let's play for $1, right? Oh. Yeah, sure. Go out and get your $1. We'll play you for $1. So we barely win this one, right? Now he's like double or nothing, da, 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 da. So we win the next one. Now it's double or nothing for $4. So $4 in 1980 is a lot of dough. Yep. So I said, yeah, we'll do you double or nothing. He goes, all right, I'll be right back. He runs out to the parking lot. Next thing I know, he's bringing in this custom stool. Uh-oh. And it's all wood engraved with his name, written on it and everything. And he stands up on the stool, puts a couple gloves on. The girl puts on a couple of gloves. And next thing you know, they take our money. And I must have had like $12 on me, and he took it all. right? So I get hustled by Chris Doobie and a girl and Joanne, and they were, good players. And so after he takes all of my money, Doobie's like, you guys are pretty good. You should come to Galaxy Arcade in Fremont. We have tournaments every Friday night. So that's what got me into the tournaments. I would go to Galaxy, see all these great players. And then the following year, I started running my own tournaments on Wednesday nights. So we could have something in our neighborhoods. And that's how it all pretty much started. So I owe it all to Doobie.
Yeah, he did it for you.
So you came up a little short against Doobie.
Jim,
I probably owe him some money. I don't,
dude. So I gotta cut in. All right.
Yeah.
I do this. I have this self-deprecating thing about the 1990. Like my Twitch name is 1990 Amateur Doubles World Champion, and I play a lot with it. And it's kind of a running joke that really entertains me and anyone. I bring it up whenever I can just to goof around. But there is a interesting side note about that. What, Phil? I'll have the audience know that when I was playing in the finals of the 1990 Amateur Doubles World Championship, we had one person supporting us versus dozens of Oklahomans. So, Phil,
Oklahomans and Texans, yes.
What's your, not to confuse my memory with yours, what is your memory of those moments in that final?
Fernando gave me $5 to root for you guys. That's kind of what I remember.
Only $5?
Which is probably, that was a month's worth of wages for him in the lettuce fields, by the way. So,
I was at that tournament, and my partner at that tournament was Brian King. I remember that tournament pretty well. And but I had no idea you guys were even starting the finals for that. And I remember walking by, and then I saw you guys in the pit table there, and there was, the entire bleacher was just full of guys rooting for the other team.
Yeah.
And it caught my attention. I said, you know what? I'm going to root for these guys. So I'm sitting by myself on the other side, and I'm yelling as much as those other 500 people are yelling for you guys. And so, I did. I had your back on that. And I definitely, threw some dirty looks at the other side.
I'll never forget it, dude, because I was like 16 years old, maybe 17 at the time. And we have one guy and an ocean of Texans, Oklahomans cheering against us. And it's just Dr. Doom. So Doom, you've been a statesman, you spoke around it, but Phil has been essentially the transition for at least 3 generations of Foosers. So as a promoter, you had that early group, and then you had me, Fernando, Serge, and James, and then you had the other group, which was Darren Carosi and Chrysander and that whole group.
Ted, all those guys,
And you were there for decades trying to transition foosball. I'll ask you this question now. I know for you, promoting was very difficult. We talked about it. It's difficult to promote or do anything and compete. But for the most part, Californians have had a bad time winning championships with all the talent and all the exposure. Maybe not as much exposure, but what, in your opinion, what has held back California foosball from being as successful as it could have been? Minus Terry Moore. Go ahead.
Well, there's a couple things, and you guys already touched on a big difference with Terry. Is if you look at most of the California players that I know from our area, there was not a lot of touring. And what touring they might have done was maybe go to the Worlds and then years later go to Vegas because it was close. But with the exception of Adrian and, maybe Dana once in a while, a lot of our players did not go to all the events. And in those days, there were 5 majors, right? So you'd go to St. Louis, you could go to Atlanta. I think the Masters was always there.
Right.
And not a lot of guys went. So that was one big part of it. And I think another part was really, it is still a little something to do with how hot and cold foosball was in California, right? When it was hot and heavy for 3 or 4 or 5 years, there'd be all these great guys come out of California and do some damage for a while. And then just before they could really break the ice, they'd kind of stop playing, or it got cold and there were no tournaments. And there was a cycle of that. So I think that is part of it. Because I don't think there was a lack of skill or talent and even mental game and toughness. I just think overall not as many big tournaments under their belt. Whereas you see, like the guys on our top 5 list and a few of the honorable mentions, they did a lot of touring and traveling. Jeep was all over the place. Trevor did a lot. Thor did for a little while. And Adrian especially. Adrian is the guy. I mean, Adrian and I started around the same time, and he has gone to at least that I know of 1 or 2 big tournaments a year for 40 years. Great.
Yeah.
All the rest of us, like myself, I've taken 4 or 5 year hiatuses 2 or 3 times at least, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I get in, things happen or whatever. And other guys do too. But Adrian is a testament to him. He has played at least in 1 big tournament a year for all these years straight and never took time off. And so I think that's part of, in a nutshell, I think that would be what I would point to, why there's a lot of guys just didn't quite break through or stayed consistently up there.
And you just played it. Now you just played in the tournament and did really well. Why don't you talk about that? You're like kind of touring right now, right? Where did you play last week?
Well, I went to Tulsa 2 weekends ago. Showed up without a partner. Tommy had me set up with a guy Friday night. He didn't show up on Saturday just before signups closed, so I snagged another guy at the last second, and we did pretty well. We did pretty well, yeah. I mean, I had 3 shots to win to get to third to play Tommy in the Open. 3 shots to win the 4th game. Ended up not making those shots, and then it went to the 5th game when we lost 8-7 in overtime to Dennis Ori, good player from Dallas. Came up, and Dennis was playing really well, and then he ended up beating Tommy, and then he lost to Brandon Moreland and Ellen Moon, who played very well in the finals. So it was a fun trip. Really, the last few years I've been threatening to kind of come out. I showed up when Adrian got inducted in the Hall of Fame. I wanted to definitely support him, and I knew Doobie was coming, and Thor, and the great Lou Salkind, who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, but that's another story. And then Eden Statulik pushed me a couple years ago to start playing. So I bought a new table, and I was going to go to Vegas this year, and then they canceled it. But I've been sitting, here every day, bored out of my mind. And I went online and I said, hey, they're having a Halloween tournament in Tulsa. I'm going. What the heck? And I'm also going to Louisiana State. I leave on Tuesday.
Awesome.
So, cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you took some years off, probably late 90s through the 2000s, and then kind of came back. Yeah. And you and Bill Maloney were the tournament directors for a year or 2 out on the Tornado Tour. Yeah. And then towards the close of the 2000s, you decided to do something that really no one's ever done before. And that is to create a tournament, a TV show where you invite 32 players, including pretty much every big name player in the world, to compete in this invitational event for Versus Television called the Foosball Master Tour in 2009. And you and I, did the play-by-play on that. But talk a little bit about how that came about and how special that was in terms of your foosball career.
Okay, well, besides the promotion and all of that, I've always tried to expand foosball in some way, right? So I had a hand in some accessories and instructional DVDs and all those types of things. And I was watching World Series of Poker in 2003, like most everybody else was, when Chris Moneymaker won, right? And that blew up World Series of Poker, right? When the world could see that some rookie, no-name, non-poker guy could go win on a satellite tournament online, qualify, and then go to play with the big boys at the World Series of Poker, right? So, in a weird coincidence, one of the guys who runs the World Series of Poker, now he works for World Poker Tour, was a friend of mine. I knew him back in the 80s. He used to hang out at my arcade. His name is Matt Savage. And when I was watching that Chris Moneymaker thing, Matt's the guy that's interviewing him at the end. And I had no idea Matt was involved in that at the time. And I'm watching the TV and there's Matt. And I'm like, oh, geez, I remember him. So I had reached out to his parents, and Matt got back a hold of me. And so we were talking, and he would come into town and visit once in a while, hanging out. And after a couple of years, I just offhandedly mentioned to him one time, I said, I've had this idea for a foosball TV show, and it's kind of similar to your program. And I said, but, I don't know where to start. And Matt was the one that helped me. He said, you know what? I know a few guys in the business at ESPN and Fox and various networks. And he says, I'll put some feelers out for you. So then over the course of probably another year or two of just, talking to people here and there, and I got a couple of nice meetings with some networks, this idea started to kind of take shape and look like it could become a reality. And, a lot of people were telling me, you're wasting your time. It'll never happen. And I just felt that it was a good time to try to do that. So that's how that started, really. And then it took a lot of help, obviously, from a lot of different people to get it over the next stage. But without Matt, I would not have gotten my foot in the door to be able to start talking to networks and negotiate and make a deal.
So, Phil, is he still a friend of yours? Is he still ready for some new ideas?
Has he disowned me? Yeah. No, Matt and I still talk from time to time. He lives in Vegas, so we'll chit chat here and there. Yeah. And then I saw him about, I don't know, we had lunch a year ago or so.
All right, just get him on ready. Get ready with that speed dial. We're gonna start working with Matt.
Well, yeah, he's different level of stuff. But so there was another coincidence that happened also that helped. And the guy that designed the graphics and the brackets and some of the animation and stuff, which I think today, when you see it again, it still looks amazing. It's still top-notch stuff. Was a guy named Mark Teague, Dreamhaven Studios. And I used to work with Mark when I was 20 years old. And I ran into Mark after I had been talking to Matt and his networks. I ran into Mark at San Diego Comic-Con. And as you guys probably know, I've been in the comic book business for 40 years as well. But Mark recognized me, came up and said hi at the convention. And he was chaperoning a guy around the convention who you might have heard of. His name is Mark Hamill. And they came over to my booth and chit-chatted. Mark and I were talking, and he's, what are you up to all these last years? And I said, same thing. I'm playing foosball and reading comic books, right? And he had gone on to work for Disney and became an animator and short film producer and stuff. So anyway, we started comparing notes, and I said, yeah, I had this idea for a show, and I'm talking to a couple networks. And so Mark came on board with Matt and myself, and he really took it to the next level with, again, his graphic design and the layout of the way we wanted the show to look. So without those two guys, I couldn't have done it.
So what's it going to take to bring this back? I mean, it sounds like a fantastic idea. I mean, this weekend is the Masters tournament in golf. How about a Masters tour every year for foosball players?
Well, that's a very good question. With the success of the Foosballers documentary earlier this year, and I had not been really following up with too much of the tournament stuff until this year. But with the success of that, suddenly my phone has been ringing a little bit. So we've been working on a few things, and we're revisiting some things with the show. And I've got a few meetings and some things lined up, so you never know.
Okay.
By the way, it's me calling Phil under different block lines, changing my voice.
And those were me as well, Phil. I don't know if you knew that. But there's a strong possibility that certainly the 2009 event, which was so special, and I remember it fondly. It was the day before the Hall of Fame Classic in 2009, and it was the pit area was sort of closed off and decorated. I mean, beautifully. Every great player was there: Collignon, Lafredo, Pappas, Spredeman, Moore, Atha. Everybody was there, and what a great event it was. Eventually won by, I'm not going to tell you, just in case we do see that down the road. But it was really a neat thing that you did, and we all appreciated it in the sport. It gave us a little bit of a promotion. It raised the profile. I mean, Versus Network at that time was a fairly prominent cable television station since, I think, deceased many years ago.
Well, they were bought out by NBC Sports, yeah.
Right. But it's certainly something I think that can be revisited and even looked back on very fondly. But a great job by you, and it was a lot of fun. Phil called me up late in the and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but late in the production process, he called me up and said, "Hey Jim, we need you." So I hopped on a plane, flew out to San Jose, went over the hill to Santa Cruz to the studio, and Phil and I stood there and commentated this. Basically an edited show where we went from this table over to the feature table and back again. And it was quite different from what I had done before. But it was really enjoyable. And I think the final product really was, I mean, the professionalism, the polish, it was a high-end product that I think Mark Teague had a lot to do with as well. And really great kudos to you. And I'm not sure you ever got the recognition you deserved for it. What a great job you did on that. And how much that really helped the foosball world. So thank you for that, Phil.
Well, I appreciate that. And real briefly, I wanted to touch on just a couple of production type of things. There was a lot of great players that I had invited to come. The 32 players were really a one-on-one invite from me because I wanted to get, of course, the best guys we could get. And I was also looking for some versatility. I wanted to showcase different shots, different styles of play, and a variety of people as well. So we could show that foosball was not limited to a certain segment. It didn't matter how big or tall, wide or thin you were, anybody could play this game if you put your mind to it. So I had handpicked the invitees to play. And of course, obviously there were some regular names, but so Tommy Atkinson wasn't able to come, Terry Rue, the great Steve Murray, and a few other guys I had invited that couldn't make it that weekend. But the players that we had, of course, were obviously great, and it worked out really well.
So let's talk about the future. Let's talk about what's happening in California today, because, of course, it's a scene still when it comes to foosball. Let's say over the last year or two, are there any players that you can think of right now that are potential for making it to the bigs? Anybody that you can think of?
In the NorCal area, yeah, there are two or three names that come to mind. There's a few of them that have been playing around on the tour for a while, but our top players are, no question right now, is Sergi Aragonis and James Castillo. James especially has made some huge strides the last few years. He's done a lot of touring, and he's had some really great high finishes. So those guys are leading the pack as far as our top players.
Sure.
We still have a few guys that are, treading water a little bit that could pop up. Dana's one of them. Of course, Adrian is still going out and playing. With the COVID this year, things are, obviously completely different. But
right.
But initially, those guys come to mind. We have a couple of good expert level players, and then he might be a pro now. Mohammed Udin is made some strides. He's getting really good. Zeke Cervantes has moved up here to NorCal. He's originally from Southern Cal, so he's always a threat if he can get out there and play regularly again. So there are some bright spots here locally, and some other good younger players coming up.
Are there any kind of organized scholastic groups playing foosball, or have local organizations?
Not with the schools. What we did years ago is, and Mark was a part of this one year, is I went to when the tech companies, that first big boom in 2000, 2001 hit, these were very progressive companies. So they were all building game rooms. So they wanted foosball tables and pool tables and video games and all this stuff. Right. So I was still a distributor for Tornado at the time. And I was selling tables right and left to all these companies. And then there's what you need from there is a few guys that are just completely into foosball that work at these companies, and they do the networking for you.
Right. Okay.
And for a few years, Yahoo was huge. They must have had 20 or 30 tables sprinkled around their campuses in Northern California and Southern California. And so I worked with one of their directors and helped them organize a big, huge intercompany tournament. So all the Yahoo players that were into foosball flew up to here in Silicon Valley, the main campus, and we had a huge foosball event.
Wow.
And I brought in some local masters and even an out-of-towner. Robert Atha was in town visiting. So Robert was there, and Dana Marr, Serge, and some of the guys. We had a big exhibition match. And then Yahoo had this massive tournament. And then from there, what we used to do would organize team building activities for these companies, right? That was always big for them. And then company challenges. So we'd have Yahoo would challenge eBay, and eBay would challenge Oracle, and Oracle would challenge Apple.
Love it.
And I would funnel these challenge matches to one of the billiard rooms that I owned the foosball tables at, right? So the billiard guy was happy. I'd get some extra money out of the foosball, and the tech guys were happy because they're playing foosball. So most of our new top players have come from the tech world, not traditionally from schools and arcades like when I, started. So I'm still seeing a lot of players from that area, and they're obviously very comfortable with, the web. So they're watching Inside Foos videos and DVDs, and they are watching the live streaming. And some of these players have been self-taught now without touring, and they're getting pretty good.
Okay.
So that's, but the scholastic stuff locally have not been able to make a dent in that.
Interesting. Well, that could change too with Foosball Clubs USA, of course.
Yes, absolutely.
I did color and play-by-play at one of these foosball tournaments. It was huge. It was with Yahoo, and it was massive, and it was really, really fun. So that was a tremendous success there. And then there was the crash, right? Was that around that time, Phil? Like after that, they had huge layoffs in tech. That kind of hurt.
Well, the first bubble burst in the early 2000s. So, foosball tables were going out all over the place, and then suddenly, these companies would buy them from me on 90-day and 120-day terms, and they'd go out of business before we'd get paid, right? But yeah, the Yahoo event that we did, Mark, I think was like 04, 05. So that was well after that initial bursting. But the thing that I've found with the tech world is these guys don't stay in these companies too long.
Yeah, the mercenaries.
They'll work for 3 or 4 years, and they're mercenaries, and they move on to other companies. So it was difficult over time to keep the same company's level of foosball excitement up. Once 1 or 2 of the key foosball guys left, the leaders, basically, it was tougher. But there are still a lot of companies local that have foosball tables and still play, and we draw from that at the local tournaments.
Do you do any kind of outreach when it comes to flyers, this kind of thing for the local clubs?
Well, so I'm pretty much retired from the Bay Area promotion these days.
Gotcha.
Over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, I sold off a bunch of my locations with tables. So the younger guys that are doing it, and they're doing a great job. There's a young guy, Brian Eaton, and Min Vu. They are running our main location in Fremont that has 5 or 6 tables, and all of our bigger tournaments were set there.
Cool.
So I've kind of passed the baton finally to some of these guys. Steve Corioso and Dana took another location in South San Jose, and they were doing some stuff for a while. But unfortunately, since the shelter in places and so forth, all of those locations are still pretty much closed as far as I know.
Sure.
And there's no promotion, but I do keep my eyes on it, and I do kind of consult here and there. And but I think these guys are doing a great job. They have gotten into some areas that I hadn't thought of before. They're really good with the social media and the streaming, and those were things that I'm an old dog, and I'm a little slow at picking that up. So they're really good at it, and I think they're doing a great job.
So, Phil, what as a promoter, from your perspective, what ingredients, if it was one or several, what ingredients go into making a really great tournament?
Well, number one is you want a consistent batch of tables, right?
Okay.
If they're all brand new or they're all 4 years old or 3 years old, at least make them all as consistent as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps in a couple of ways. Word gets out that, hey, your tables are nice and guys want to come to the next event, guys and girls want to come to the next event. And it cuts down on actual logistics of the tournament. People complaining, I don't want to play on this table, or table maintenance or that type of thing, conflicts in matches. So that's important. Venue obviously is important. You'd like to try to find a place that the venue can make some money as well. So there needs to be, food and drinks there.
Sure.
But the consistency of the tables, obviously, for the players, Mark and Jim, as you guys know, we're a finicky bunch, right? So those are important. Second, I think, or third, something that's got lodging and some of the things you would typically look for, so that people can come in from out of town and not have too far to go to play. So those would be the three things in order, I think.
Yeah, it's really about the player experience, isn't it? It's about making sure that player has a good time, whatever that means, good accommodations, a well-run tournament, fun, etc., in order to get them back. And player experience is something that maybe has been a little underrated or not appreciated or not focused on as much over the last 15 years or so, but it's something that is vital. Obviously, there's so many other aspects. It's pre-promotion, it's post-promotion, it's coverage of an event these days, whether it's live streaming or social media or whatever. But it really comes down to making sure that players have a great competitive environment, but also that they have a good time.
Right. And while we're on that subject too, I really want to give out some respect to longtime promoters who've done it for years and years and years that maybe don't get quite the due that they should. Charles McIntosh comes to mind. Sure. Mary Moore's doing a great job. I mean, it's not an easy job. You can't make everybody happy. And, to continue to do it year after year, I know what it takes. So I have a lot of respect for those that are out there doing it.
Yeah.
Hey, Mark Torres, real quick. Your first experience with Phil Schlaefer. You walk into that arcade up there in Northern California. You're a kid. Your first experience with him. You see the great hair. You see the
dude. This is okay. Phil. And so Phil used to peg his pants. Phil used to roll his pants, peg his pants up, and he had this perfect. Did you perm your hair, bro, or was it naturally curly?
Of course he did.
Dude, it was not cheap to keep that image, let me tell you.
Dude, listen. He permed his hair. He had Phil is like, he's like, I don't know, I want to say it respectfully. He's like the dream blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 6'2", hulking man with the peg pants and the hair and the biceps. He must have done like 100 curls like in the parking lot. There's a picture.
Phil, we have a graphic of you on the televised side that
shit.
It's from the Foosball Master Tour.
He's like super duper pretty boy. And Phil's game, people's personalities are manifested in their foosball game. So Phil has a very pretty game. He's a pretty boy with a pretty game. He had this 5-bar series. When you see it, it was always very precise and very accurate. He tosses in a certain way. Everything is like his form is really important to him. So Phil lived up to the billing. Dr. Doom billing. What?
You know who my favorite player was Tom Spear.
Tom Spear. Yeah, Tom Spear. Yeah.
And I was trying to do a lot of stuff like Tom. I shot the pull shot like he did.
Yeah.
I tried to stand like him. Everything was Tom Spear for some years. And then I realized I'm not Tom Spear and I'll never be Tom Spear. So I gotta
that's such a common mistake.
I'm not winning like this.
I did the exact same thing. I wanted to be like a Spear Lafredo, and then you realize like 4 years in, you're like, I can't do this anymore.
Ain't happening.
It's not working for me.
Yeah, so I had to change up a little.
It's so good, man. But
okay,
yeah, those were great times.
To be fair, okay, Phil, now it's your turn. So you tell me, because I don't know these guys too well. First of all, what was Mark like the first time you met him? What was he really like? You can tell me.
Normally people mature in years, right? As you get older, you get a little more. But I gotta say, it's possible he's regressed, but he might be exactly the same. I mean, out of everybody I've known, I don't think this guy's changed at all.
It's hilarious.
You know, I mean, he's trying not to swear as much, but other than that, it's the same guy.
I see.
So,
I see.
Since when?
You know, I mean, in those days, and Jim Stevens touched on this, things were very territorial, right? SoCal didn't like NorCal, right?
Right.
Except when we toured, right?
Yeah.
And same thing locally here. The East Side San Jose foosball guys, that was a rougher neighborhood, no question about it. And the Fremont area was different, which was a half hour north. And then the San Jose guys. Locally, weekly tournaments, we didn't like each other. We didn't hang out. We didn't talk much, right? But when we went on tour, we all supported each other. Everybody suddenly we were all buddies.
There you go.
Because we all came from the same area. And same thing with California, right? You know, I'd go down to LA for a tournament or whatever, and I was irritated at those guys. But when we all showed up in Dallas or wherever,
true,
I rooted for everybody in California. I rooted for Evan and Eden and even Dan Drexler, right? And Kevin O'Neill and the smart asses, right? Dan Tyval and Dan Sloan. I mean, you know, I root for the guys, right? So that part was kind of cool, but in some respects, I think it hurt us because being territorial like that, even locally here, guys wouldn't share information.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how it was in LA, but up here, everything was guarded, right? I mean, I couldn't go to Scott Stewart and ask him advice on something for two reasons. One, Scott wouldn't tell me what was correct. And two, I felt I didn't want to humble myself in front of Scott and ask him, right? Or if I went to anybody else like that. So now what I'd like to see is players are much more open in helping newer players. They're not so worried about, this guy's going to take my secrets and beat me someday, right? Because the end result is it's going to make you a better player if your competition is better week after week.
Correct.
Yeah.
But back in the day, everything was really guarded, right? Doobie wouldn't tell me anything, how he blocked somebody or his 5-bar D. You know, Adrian never talked much one way or the other.
Yeah.
He was always very neutral, but he never shared a lot either, right?
Yeah.
He would just nice you into quit asking him, whereas the other guys would just flat out not tell you. So we had a lot of that, and that hurt us for a while as well.
Sure.
But I do like what I'm seeing the last 10 years or so. Everybody's much more approachable and just willing to teach other players
I think,
in their area.
I think
if I
Ryan,
could add to that.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that Ryan Moore has said that publicly that he wants competition. He wants better players. He wants to see these new players come up and kick his butt because he wants that. That means, what is it? The top 5 that nobody's going to break through. I mean,
I'd say I call that a little bit different because when you're Ryan Moore or Tony Spreedeman and you're looking down from the mountaintop hoping to be challenged, so it's a little bit different. But to your point, Phil, I'd say it was even worse because in our regions, we would play our B game. So if we're practicing and trying to prepare for a tournament, you didn't play your A game. You played your B game because you didn't want. And so now you're hurting yourself because you're not even developing your best game. You're not even learning how to adapt. You're playing your secondary game so that when you lost A, you could tell yourself, my ego's protected because I wasn't playing my A game when I lost to Phil, and he can't get any secrets from me because he didn't see my best stuff. So you have all these weird like layers of. Like
I just learned something from Mark Torres. He had an A game. I did not know that, Mark.
Hey, me excluded. Me excluded. But you know, it's funny. Phil's saying something else too. It's interesting. The East Siders. I'm an East Sider. The East Siders. That was like there was a rougher part of town. And Phil, I mean, you're basically what, Los Gatos, Campbell. That's where you were.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that like there was regional tension. Based on like socioeconomic differentiation. Like if you had more money, you're Anglo, you're on the other side of the tracks. So Phil was coming into the east side and winning our tournaments. But to make no mistake, there was all kinds of tenses. It was tense, and I think I might be frozen on my screen. I don't know. But it was tense anyway. And so,
but for the record, I didn't take any crap from those East Side guys.
no, those rolled up pants, and the curly hair and the Mustang or whatever you were driving.
Yeah, I remember vividly. The first time I ever met you, Phil Schlaefer, early '80s when I went up there. I mean, you were impressive to look at, obviously, but you also had a good game, and you treated us Southern Californians well, even though you probably secretly hated us because we hated you. But do you remember? Because I feel like you remembered meeting me because we'd run into each other after that. You'd always say hi, Jim, and all of that. But do you recall the early days of you and I meeting each other under competitive circumstances for the most part?
Oh, absolutely. When I really took notice of you was when you had that great third place finish, and who was your goalie? Was it Miles?
It was Clint Coyne out of at the time out of Southern California, later out of Chicago.
That's right. Yeah, you had your hat slung really low, and you took third, I think, second or third in the open doubles,
third in open doubles, yeah.
And I remember that watching you play all through that weekend, and just chit-chatting with you a little bit after that. You didn't talk much during that whole tournament because you were very focused. That was the most focused I'd ever seen you.
Yeah.
And then after that, we talked quite a bit, but yeah.
No, I remember those days fondly. And again, yes, we Southern California, we hated the San Diegoites, as we call them. We hated the players from San Diego, Evan Stachlik and Dave Gummison and Terry Moore. We hated them, and they hated us. But then when we'd go up north to play you guys, San Diego and LA were like buddies. Like we were hanging out, we were sharing hotel rooms.
Yes.
And then once we'd go out of state, like you say, to the World Championships, California once again was whole. But it was a weird dynamic and understandable. I still, to this day, look at Mark Torres and you as NorCals, and I just can't quite get there as far as really liking you.
Well, Jim, we look at you as weak and soft, but we never say it out loud. So it's just, what?
Hey,
where are we going?
Mark, you tell me that. You tell me that on a weekly basis. So coming from you, it's expected.
Man. See what I got to put up with here, Phil? You see what I got to deal with on a weekly basis? I mean, I get out of bed, I look forward to a day, and then I got to do this with these guys. Just kidding.
Well, it makes you mentally tough, right?
That's right.
You'll thank them for this someday.
That's right. I'm getting an education at the age of 62. I'm getting an education.
So let me ask my question. I got a question about that I ask masters, and it's for their own point of reference to learn, teach, grow, and develop in the game. The one thing that stops people from getting to the next level is that they execute differently when the pressure's on. And there's a million reasons why, including your heart rate and your adrenaline and the anxiety and your grip changes and the stress changes and your reality changes. And being a master and a high-level player like you are, you find ways to execute with consistency when the pressure's on. So what happens in your mind when you have to make a big pass or have to make a big shot? And when you're performing at a high level and able to maintain that, what do you do mentally, Dr. Doom?
I think it all is in the preparation first. And I had long talks with Steve Murray about this years ago. And you have to practice just like you feel like you're playing in a match. You heard Ryan Moore say it in Foosballer's documentary. He's practicing on that table by himself, but the whole time he's picturing playing Tony across the table.
Mm-hmm.
And he's picturing in his mind defenses and so forth. So when you get into that high level stress situation, which is going to come for everybody, what I would do is reach back and say, you know what? I've done this 1,000 times. This is no different than any other situation. And yeah, you're trying to trick yourself a bit, but that practice preparation is the key. So once you're there, you don't have to make, like a huge mental adjustment when you're starting to feel the heat.
Yeah. Okay.
That's good stuff. And again, I mean, the point about practicing the way you would play. I mean, that's vitally important. Oftentimes players practice, they goof off, they play 2-ball rollerball, they play rollerball.
Right.
You really want to practice those habits, develop those habits, as you say, You've been there 1,000 times because that's the way you prepared.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, my practice recently here, obviously I'm spending some time by myself with the shelter in place, but I'm setting up point situations on the table. I'm setting up defenses, and I'm going through the whole play from drop to shot. When to call a timeout. It's a 3-3 situation. I'm doing this. I'm marking the score markers just like I would in a game. Steve Murray gave me this great practice drill. And it's not as easy as it sounds at some point. You set up a defense on your 5-row. So if you're playing forward, you set up a goalie defense. You drop the ball just like you would in a match, right? You take your deep breath, whatever you do. You bring the ball over, you execute a perfect pass. You set up, you wait on the ball, and you execute a perfect shot. You do all of that. You mark 1 point on your side of the score markers, right? Now you repeat that. And if you make a mistake anyway in that series, right? If you miss the pass, if it nicks the player, if you don't make the point, something that's different, the other side of the table gets a point. So you're playing against yourself.
Like that.
And there's times where, you're just 5-0, 5-0, 5-1, 5-0, 5-0. And there's other days, maybe you're tired that day or whatnot, you're not focusing, you can't win. You're losing 5-4, 5-3 because you missed something. And you also put it in places where because everybody knows maybe they have one little weak spot, right? My up is not always in this spot here or whatever it might be. That's the one that you're working on, and don't make it easy. And you'd be surprised just doing that simple exercise by yourself, thinking about you're in a real match. You'd be surprised sometimes you can't win.
Yeah.
It's weird.
Huh.
And
sounds difficult. It sounds difficult, actually. Sounds very difficult.
Yeah.
Just like I said, set up a 5-bar where you want it, right? A little bit off the wall, whatever. And you drop the ball, and just like you're playing a real match, you bring it over, you set up your rollover, you set up your pull, whatever you do, and then you shoot your shot after so many. You'd be surprised that it's not always that easy. So little things like, I don't know, Steve taught me that one. That one I do a lot. James Castillo is really good at visualizing and looking ahead. So those are things that, try to practice. But, you get in a tough situation and you're feeling the heat, you're gripping a little tighter, and, maybe you practice a little bit with an iron grip on the handle, and it slows your shot down, but you get the feel of, I'm gripping too tight. I got to back off a little bit.
So intentionally gripping too tight and then letting off the pressure. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Telling yourself, you know what? Because in the match, you hope that you've got enough time to think about what's happening now, which Jim Stevens taught me years and years ago. Jim, how come you were so focused that tournament? And I don't remember exactly how you explained it to me, but you must have just read The Inner Game of Tennis or something. And you had these great explanations to me on how you were focused on just what was in front of you. You didn't care what just happened 5 seconds ago, and you don't care what happens 5 seconds from now. You're just trying to get the ball, pass the ball, and score the ball.
Yeah, be in the moment, be here now.
Yeah. And it's easy to talk about and say, but unless you practice it, you can't just turn that on at the last second in the tournament. So,
and for anyone listening to the radio show that doesn't know what that is, that book has helped so many foosers. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis by Galloway. And he just changed everything from racket swing to foosball swing, and it applies directly to playing at a high level.
Yeah, I think in the late 70s, early 80s, more foosers bought that book than anybody I know.
Yeah.
Yes.
The book was written in the 60s,
book
wasn't
back in the day. People forget about it now, but that was a great book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be poignant even today for anyone to read. We definitely recommend it. Timothy Galloway, The Inner Game of Tennis, Self 1, Self 2. And being in the moment and not worrying about what could happen, what did happen. Just make good plays in the moment. And things will take care of themselves. And so,
good
Phil,
fun fact. I say one thing about that book. Steve, I didn't know this. Steve Kerr makes all the Golden State Warriors read that book.
Interesting.
Shooting.
Okay.
I didn't know that until like a year or two ago. I'm like, really? And he does that. Kevin Durant loves that book. Anyway, he does.
It applies to everything. It applies to life in general. And that brings it, I guess, to my final question for you, Phil. Because I know for me, foosball has kind of been my martial art throughout my life. It's taught me so much about living in the moment, for one thing, and about how to deal with pressure situations, etc. Well, has foosball been that way for you? Have you learned a lot about yourself and about how to live your life through foosball?
I would say in some circumstances, yes. And it's funny because, in foosball, like most people, they don't want to lose, right? They're very competitive, and these top players, and no matter what the sport is, they have a really hard drive just not to lose. And I'm that way in a lot of different things, but I can take the losing in almost everything else, but losing in foosball is still tougher to take than all this other stuff that maybe matters more, but for some reason, sometimes when you want it more, right? So it's good to go through and temper things in life, but yeah, I learned some things. I learned, maybe good practice habits, doing some things, every day for a short time a day. Taught observation skills, because foosball takes a lot of that. So had to deal with people sometimes. So I would say yes.
So Phil,
go ahead.
Go ahead,
Go ahead, Tom, please.
Yep.
No.
After you,
I
sir.
refuse. No.
Go ahead, jump in there.
So, Phil, first of all, we greatly appreciate you taking the time to spend with us. What's the future for Phil Schlaefer? What's your future going to be like? What are you going to be doing?
Schlaefer.
For Phil Schlaefer.
Yes, for Phil Schlaefer. Sorry.
Well, that guy's future. Well, with me, there's been some nice stuff accomplished. Mainly, my girls are adults and out of the house. And so I'm going to take some time the next couple of years and devote to foosball stuff. Cool. Some promotion stuff in my own way. This is part of that, and talking with Jim and Mark, that type of thing. Going to more tournaments, seeing old friends, seeing some of the new players. So I see that in the next couple of years for me.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that for sure, and we have many great memories yet to come for sure.
We glossed over it earlier, dude. What is it? So he's a comic book guy, owned comic book stores, does comic book restoration. What is the most expensive comic memorabilia you've ever owned, Phil?
Well, first off, that's the most common question, right?
Superman #1.
Super unoriginal question for me.
Expensive comic you've ever had, right? Why did you sell it? That type of thing. I've been dealing with comics and even sports memorabilia years ago, but I've had a lot of cool things go through my hands, and you look back and think, man, I wish I would have kept this, or I should have kept that. But comic book wise, I've had a few big ones. Amazing Fantasy 15. That's the first appearance of Spider-Man. I had a really, really high grade, one of the nicest copies out there. Sold that.
What's that worth now? What'd you lose on?
That copy that I sold now is worth about $700,000.
Whoa!
And what'd you sell it for?
$48,000.
48?
No kidding.
That was about 15, 16 years ago.
Oh my gosh!
But I've sold some for more money. But that one sticks out.
Yeah.
Jim would appreciate. I had a really cool Babe Ruth autographed baseball that I kept for some years, but I sold it. I had a Ted Williams, a game worn jersey that was really cool.
Ever.
Whoa!
Oh my
God!
But
my favorite player. But I sold that back in the '90s. But that's my business, so you've got to decide in this type of business: do you want to be super collector? Or do you want to make a living? So I have sold off most of that kind of stuff when I get it. I don't keep too many big things like that anymore. I've seen too many guys in the business, they keep all the good stuff and they never sell anything, and they don't really make any money, and then they kind of go away.
So Phil, how about writing a comic book about foosball, including all the top players as characters?
Well, gee, if I could get Mark to pose for the drawings, I suppose that would be a bestseller. That would look good.
Ant-Man. Phil, you and I go way back as California players. It's kind of the theme for tonight is the state of California, whether it's northern, whether it's southern, it doesn't matter. It's the Golden State. But you're a guy who is major mark as a player, as a promoter, as a tournament director, as a TV producer, as a teacher with your videos, and as a businessman as well. Really a renaissance man when it comes to the sport of foosball, and we really, really appreciate you joining us tonight, especially me as a fellow Californian and a longtime friend. But thanks for being with us tonight.
Oh yeah.
And kind of looking back on California foosball and the career of Phil Schlaefer. Thanks, buddy.
Well, thank you guys. And just to add one last thing, I did drink an IPA while we were talking.
Oh, nice.
Space Dust is on my list right now.
All right.
Love it.
Out of Seattle, Washington.
Is awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
So thank you for having me, guys. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Phil, anytime you'd like to come back, the door is always open to you.
Great.
I'm going to call you tomorrow, Doom, about just like leveraging everyone you know for foosball stuff. All right.
Foosball Master Tour is
Feel
coming.
free to do that anytime you want.
Thanks, man. You're the best.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
That
We'll see
Foosball
you.
Master Tour may make another appearance down the road here. Who knows? Thanks, Phil. We'll see you, buddy.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Phil.
Bye-bye.
So yeah, so guys, I got to say, I've got a whole new perspective on the California scene when it comes to promotions, players, and just generally trash talking about how you guys really feel about each other. I'm glad I went through this.
You know what made it lively and fun? Guess what? L.A. and San Diego didn't get along. Fremont and San Jose didn't get along. Phil's from Campbell and San Jose didn't get along. Campbell and Fremont didn't get along. And it's nothing more. It's basically not any different than any type of tribalism or regionally. If you have differences, you have antagonism. But these communities come together when the call to action is to come together. So when it was, and I think the same could be said about the World Cup. You have regional, and you have disparate, and you have associations, and you have people at war with each other, and then you go to now you're one country, and guess what? Everyone has the same flag, and you fight on the same team. It's a great story that repeats itself.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it repeats itself in every country around the world when it comes to the World Cup. One other thing about Phil Schlaefer, he made sure, and I got the count here at 62 different players that he named
62?
From the early days of foosball.
Oh my gosh!
And he definitely
That's a fake stat. That's a fake stat. Calling it out. That's
Clay,
fake. I can tell.
You
2
calling
rounds
that
the
out?
number.
Are you calling that out, Clay?
The voice of reason. I know fake when I hear it.
He made sure that he got everybody in there. And one thing, though, he did help create a lot of California players in several different generations, as we pointed out. So great to have him with us. I got a couple of things I do want to mention. Tuesday, the Lynn and Caddy show on the Inside Foods TV Twitch show. Let's not forget about that. Their special guest is German champion Semyon Mensah. That's on at 7 p.m. Central European time, 1 p.m. Eastern time here in the States. And Lynn and Caddy doing a great job with that show on twitch.tv/InsideFoosTV, the Twitch channel. So I just wanted to bring that up. But a great night of talking about California foosball tonight, Tom.
Oh yeah, the best. And so now California, now we have to kind of maybe move our way across the country, make our way to New York State someday. Maybe, I don't know, 2 years from now, something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's 50 states, and New York may come before that.
We should start with Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico,
and Guam as well.
All right. I'm down with that.
No, and Mark and I are always struggling. We're always struggling to come up with a top five players from a state. We can do that. Texas, Minnesota, Colorado, New York, Georgia. We've done Florida. So this is something maybe we can look forward to in the future.
No doubt.
I have a suggestion, Jim, for the next top 5.
What is it?
The top 5 most basic questions by Mark Torres that have been called out by the guest.
Like what?
Oh.
Give me an example.
I got a 10 on that one.
like what's the most expensive comic book you've ever had?
Well, I've been asked that by everybody. That's the same thing that everybody asked.
Again?
But no one here heard it. I didn't know he had a $700,000 Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I did know that. I didn't know it was worth $700,000.
That was awesome. I love that he answered it that way. That was great.
He did. He did.
I have a
He's
tip
in
for
other
you.
stuff too.
I have a tip for
He's
you.
one of the foremost comic collectors in the nation.
Wow.
Yeah,
That-
and he
well, we could have
restores
another
them.
show
So he
about
might have
that.
restored something more expensive than he's ever owned. Frankly,
Wow.
we don't know that
That
answer
is
to that
cool.
question.
Well, our thanks to Phil, of course, and to Jim and to Mark. We're back again next week with FoosTalk Live. Thanks for joining us this week. FoosTalk Live is always back.
FoosTalk Live is a product of Foosball Radio and Inside Foos TV. All rights reserved. Our sincere thanks to 518 Prince, Foosball Clubs USA, Foosballers the Movie, Foos by Tony and Foos by Brandon, and the United States Table Soccer Organization. Join us next Sunday for another episode of FoosTalk Live. In the meantime,
we'll see you foozin'.